Welcome to Normal Island Live. I'm Ben Mclaine, and tonight I will be joined by some guy that I dragged off the street. Let's bring him on. Yeah, what's his name? It's
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm
Curtis
doing here.
Curtis Daly, I think.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Curtis Daly.
When do I get my payment?
We'll get round to that. We're just bringing
Sure.
bringing the gear in now. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's do this then. Let's do this then. Don't forget that Curtis and I will be responding to your comments and questions at the end, so do drop them into the chat. But coming up on tonight's show, the Greens poll higher than ever, but will media coverage reflect that? El-Fasher falls to the RSF, the silent ethnic cleansing that the UK could end, and work must be grueling. The government urges councils to scrap the 4-day week. As ever, please don't forget to like and share the stream. Share the stream. It's Halloween. Share the stream. Become a subscriber. It really helps us out, and you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. Right, let's go on to our first story. So the Greens are polling higher than ever before, as they are now in the 16 to 17% range in the multiple polls. And I feel like everyone's covered this, right? Everyone's done their little bit on, wow, aren't the Greens doing well? So here at Turn Left, I wanted to bring you a bit of a different angle, in that I wanted to question, why are the mainstream media still not covering the Greens in the same way that Reform are getting coverage for similar polling numbers? And to find out about this, let's take a look at how Reform were polling last year and how they were treated by our media. Now, according to the Political Quarterly, under the banner of Reform UK, Nigel Farage's rebranded outfit secured more than 4 million votes in the 2024 UK election, 14.3% of the total votes cast, winning 5 seats in the process. 14.3% of the vote is below where the Greens are now in current polling, not by much, but it's interesting to compare the treatment that Reform got in 2024 to how the Greens are treated when they're currently, obviously, on 17%. Loughborough University published a report on media coverage during the 2024 general election, and the report stated, Reform UK was the only political party to feature in more good news than bad, with Nigel Farage stealing the show. The Reform Party was the third most prominently featured political party in the press at 10%, with returning leader Nigel Farage accounting for most of these appearances. So if 14% gets you featured more positively, and you can get 10% of all press coverage, will this work out for the Greens on 17%? Proportionally, can we expect our mainstream media to cover the Greens 15% rather than 10%, because it's a little bit higher, of the time, and in an overall positive light? If not, why not? Why would our media cover Reform positively on such a low percentage, but the Greens don't get the same treatment? Kind of makes you wonder whether Reform is actually the anti-establishment party, right? This party full of millionaires and private schoolboys. I think that 80% of Reform's current crop of MPs were privately educated. And then there is the other set of polling data that we should talk about. Among 18 to 49s, the Greens are the most popular party overall on 25% of the vote, and among 18 to 24s, the Greens have 40% of the total vote, more than Reform, the Conservatives, and the Lib Dems combined. That's groundbreaking, I think. I think that's completely. It's just it gives me, it fills me with hope for the future in a way that you really can't get currently from looking at mainstream media and mainstream politics. Young people are overwhelmingly left wing, and when I say young people, I mean anyone under the age of 49. It's quite a large cohort of young people, but we still get this thing of the media treating the far right like a resurgent youth, and like it's being driven by a resurgent youth, when actually what it's being driven by is largely the way that the media operates. And I think we really need to have a conversation in this country about radicalized pensioners who hold extreme and hateful beliefs about all sorts of things, but it's just because our right-wing mainstream media has such a monopoly on the views that older people are exposed to. I always say you're never too smart to fall for propaganda. There's no such thing as being too smart to fall for propaganda. Anyone can be lied to, and unless you're exposed to the full range of facts, there's no way really that you can you can fact check it. If people are bombarded with propaganda, of course they're going to be like this. But it's not just bullshit about immigration. I was listening to, or I overheard a conversation in a cafe where there was a group of older women talking, and one of them was saying, just caught a snippet of conversation, was saying, no, they chant from the river to the sea at these Palestine marches because what they believe is that they should get all of the Jews and throw them into the sea. And it's like, I overheard this and I was like, you have no idea what that phrase means, and no one's corrected you on it. You've just like read something in a newspaper, and it has or maybe on Facebook, and it has completely misshapen your views, and you're kind of not exposed to anything, any kind of counter narrative, especially with those people being in social groups as well that just consume GB News, the Daily Mail, the Express, the Times, because where do you get your where do you get your news from? You get it from the newspaper. People don't think about the biases that these things have, and it has a massive impact. We're always treated to the idea that reform are surging among young people all the time. And so you get videos like this one from Reform Conference.
Reform Party Conference 2025. They've got a huge bus. They've got a few hundred people milling around here already. One of the interesting things is the age of the members that we see here. A lot of them are quite a lot younger than you might expect.
I'm 21 years old.
19.
I am 19 years old, okay.
I'm 19 and I'm here because I believe Britain desperately needs change.
We're going to have a chat to them and find out why they're here and what they think.
There's a huge sense of anger at the establishment. The way young people have been let down, the soaring housing prices, the lack of space in the NHS, the economy in a terrible state it's ever been. You know, Labour and the Tories have presided over this continued decline of our country.
The ideology of reform, almost like Thatcher in a way, I think it's important for us young people because it gives us an aspiration to have our own home and to work hard and actually be rewarded for it. All of my friends are basically the same as me. Before, to be against the system when you're younger, it was to be more liberal. But now, to be against the system as a young, it's actually to be more right.
I was a member of the Conservative Party, but I left the Conservative Party after what they did to Liz Truss. When they installed Rishi Sunak, I think it was a sham. Just the sheer disillusionment with the Labour Party and the Tories. They've had it. They've had it. The two-party system has had it, right? Reform is the future.
I'm a Republican as well. I believe that you're seeing that a lot in the Western world. You're seeing right-wing parties, whether it's center-right or right-wing populist. Young people are ditching the left.
Oh, really? Are young people leaving the left? Or is our media just not being honest about it? Because these numbers tell a very different story, don't they? And this is the thing. I just wanted to say that in that video, you notice the concerns that the young people brought up there. NHS, the cost of housing and the cost of living, right? Three things that the left should be way ahead on. If we start talking to these concerns, I think there's a chance that we can win these young people over, but more on that later. Basically, you can't lie to young people, and this is why we get this poll. You can't lie to young people like you can with the over 50s, because we have more access to information and we're more likely to be trained in critical analysis. We're just less trusting of media, and you've given us every reason to believe that we're justified in being less trusting. Of course, sexism is also a big part of this. Most of those in Reform's surge and in that video were young men, right? And young women's views just aren't treated as serious in our politics, and they get dismissed and belittled all the time. Political autonomy is just not given to certain groups, particularly groups of women in this country. But that doesn't mean that young men are hopeless. As I said, they're more easily led astray by faux populism, but this can come from kind of the left or the right. If you don't believe me on this, here's a segment from a mini documentary that The Guardian did about at Reform UK's conference earlier this year.
The Englishman is sort of forgotten in a way. especially with the immigration and all of these laws coming in. Like, we're just sort of forgotten about.
The last time we saw political fervour like this was probably around the Labour leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. I was wondering, what do you guys think of Jeremy Corbyn?
He reached out to me. Jeremy, I wouldn't say he was a bad candidate. Before I moved to Reform, I didn't mind Labour, but then with Keir Starmer, I just felt he let the country down.
Politically, I'm closer to Corbyn than Farage, but I think young people are just looking for someone to look to, not necessarily policies to look to. So when they see Nigel Farage saying, these two parties have done this to your life, your future's going to be terrible, but we're going to fix it. And Farage can speak so much louder than the Conservatives and the Labour Party can. So I think it doesn't have to necessarily be Farage, or not even a right-wing party, just a successful, popular protest party, I think, is what young people are looking for, and that's what the Reform Party is.
Everywhere we went, we found discontent amongst young men, and for many, a sense that the world was leaving them behind. It felt like the votes of many young men were there for the taking, and Reform seemed to understand this the best.
Isn't that interesting? Those people there believe that they were actually, many of them believe that their politics were actually closer to Jeremy Corbyn's than Nigel Farage's. And it does make sense if you think about it. The idea of like populist, any kind of anti-establishment politics being at the core of what young people will believe, because young people, of course, want to define themselves against their parents. It's why you go through a teenage rebellious phase, right? It's just like a slightly older version of that. Politically, you define yourself against older generations, typically. But, you want to define yourself against an establishment. And I want to bring in Curtis now. Do you think the Greens will be given more favourable coverage? And how can the left appeal to young men while making sure young women's voices get a better platform? I hope you found that interesting, by the way.
No, it is interesting. There's so many layers to this, actually. I first want to say that the media definitely haven't ignored the Green Party. They've covered Zach Polansky a lot, and I think that has helped the momentum and the growth of the Green Party. But there's a reason why the media won't ignore Zach Polansky. I've even seen GB News, who never, ever, ever talk about the Greens, now talk about the Greens. But they're doing it because they want to see Labour split the vote, right? Especially for GB News. They are basically the Reform News network, right? So when the Green Party is covered, it's done through the lens of this is Labour's failure. Now, that is actually true. The media aren't lying there, but it doesn't mean that they're favourable or sympathetic to left-wing politics. It's simply another way to sort of, boost reform. So there's that caveat. The second caveat, though, is just because they cover them more, as you pointed out, it doesn't mean they're going to get positive coverage. Reform do have the most positive coverage because they are the political establishment. Many think that they are anti-establishment, but they're very much of the political establishment. Most of them are ex-Tories. They've just left the Conservative Party and joined the Reform Party. Those clips there were very interesting, especially the second one where that young lad was like, I probably agree more with Jeremy Corbyn than Nigel Farage. For the mainstream political commentariat, that is going to explode their minds. They will not get that. In fact, I think Navarra, not too long ago, made a couple of polls, or a series of polls, which showed that Reform voters preferred Jeremy Corbyn to Keir Starmer. Right. And the point is, people don't think in terms of left wing and right wing. That's us political nerds, right? That's the media commentariat, and I'm not saying we're part of that, but we think that this is left wing, this is right wing. People don't think in those terms, right? People think of one, populism, and two, vibes. I mean, the second guy who said I'm closer to Corbyn than Farage, he said it's not even really about policy, and I think that's where you get the majority of people. It is very vibes based. Unfortunately, in our political system, in our media ecosystem, policy is rarely discussed. In fact, you have to make certain campaigns. You have to do certain things to get policy notice, which is what Zach Polansky's doing when it comes to wealth taxes. That's only in the narrative because he's been pushing and pushing and pushing, right? But generally, it's not about policy. It is about vibes. Let's look at America for a second. I mean, why did people jump to Donald Trump a lot? And I think a lot of people think this was probably overblown. I think it's part of it. When he was going on podcasts, he was trying to win the cultural zeitgeist, right? And I think when you look at Zohran Mamdani, he's doing it for the left. I mean, he went on, I can't remember the names of the podcast. I don't really watch the sort of dude bro manosphere podcast. Not my thing. But he was going on these right-leaning podcasts and he's winning them over. Why? Yes, he's got good policy, but the man is so cool. The guy knows how to campaign. He doesn't reek political establishment. He's like your normal guy. And that's where sort of populism comes from. I mean, agree or disagree with Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, to many people, said he is a breath of fresh air. He's not like the rest of them. Zach Polansky's the same. I've seen a couple of people say, I don't actually agree that much with Zach Polansky. I'm more of a reform person, but I really like Zach Polansky. So a lot of it is actually vibes, and a lot of it is populism. Even in the first video, which I wouldn't say is very representative of young people, they were either very posh Tories or they sound pretty privately educated, or there's an American guy. I mean, that's not representative. But as you rightly identified, they were talking about things that we care about: the NHS, public services, the housing crisis. Now, of course, everyone has the same diagnosis, right? The problem is the solution, because one of the people who was featured in that video said that's why we need more Thatcherism. It's like, Thatcherism caused this, right? People have the same understanding when it comes to the diagnosis of the situation, and people feel like the political establishment is not there to serve them, and that's where you do have a split between the left and the right. Now, here's the false narrative from the media, is to push this idea that there's this big sort of reform surge among the young. Rubbish. Rubbish. The polls show that the left are overwhelmingly left-wing. And why is that? Well, the first reason is because what have us young people endured our entire lives? I mean, as a millennial, we are the first generation to be worse off than our parents. It's going to be the same for Gen Z. It's because before we even got into the world of work, you had the Iraq War. Now, if you don't even remember the Iraq War, you got the 2008 financial crisis, right? Two major political crises before most of us started work. Then you had austerity, 15 years of austerity, then the pandemic, and now we've had a housing crisis. So no one, our age or younger, believes in the power of the state or the market to deliver the kind of life that our parents endured. So why would anyone believe in the system when it's the very system that has pulled the ladder up from beneath us, or so above us, right? And especially the market. And that's where people turn to the left, because they realize the market hasn't delivered, especially when it comes to housing. People are thinking, why aren't we just building houses? Why aren't we building social and council houses? Why are we leaving it to property speculators? Okay, very Thatcherite politics. And people don't want that. Now, of course, there's this myth that a lot of people say, well, young people are very left-wing when they're young, and they become more conservative as they get older. That's not true. In fact, under Thatcher, a lot of young people supported her. They did. So it's not about being young left-wing, old right-wing. It's just responding to the material conditions we're in. So the reason why we're all left-wing is because we're recognizing that the political system doesn't work. To address your final point, how does the left tackle... Because, look, it is true, even though young people are with the left, young men are a bit more conservative than women, right? But that's kind of been the trend throughout all age cohorts. Like, if you're a guy, you're typically just a bit more conservative. One reason is because women have faced systemic oppression and usually sympathize with that. And I'm not saying that men don't face oppression. They absolutely do. Even white men face oppression as a working class person, right? But of course, it's way more visible when you're a person of color or a woman, right? So that's one factor. The second factor is that I think neoliberalism has become a cultural thing. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, Margaret Thatcher used neoliberalism to change the hearts and minds of the country. She said that herself. In fact, she said, I'm using the economics as a method to change the hearts and minds of this country, to turn us into a uber individualist society. Now, how does this fit in with my analysis? Andrew Tate's sort of manosphere, his political package he's selling people to young men, is basically feminism's gone too far. You, as a white dude, are actually being treated as a minority, and the political establishment doesn't serve you. So join Hustlers University, join me, and blame women, right? Screw women, make loads of money, and then they'll be crawling all over you, right? It's a super individualist, get rich way, but it's packaged in a cultural lens, a cultural paradigm. And what the left need to do is kind of do the same, right? I mean, even think about unions back in the day when there were strong unions. yes, there's an economic case for strong unions, but I think there was a cultural thing, that idea of solidarity among people. It was culturally relevant to say, we should not allow the big bosses to get away with what they're doing. Now, culturally, young people are too scared to ask for a pay rise. So the culture needs to change. And lastly, we don't need to pit men against women. We don't need to say, how do we bring in men without alienating women? No, what we do is what I would say Zach Polanski's doing is the eco-populism. It's the unifier. It's saying that regardless of your race, your gender, religion, right, you are part of the 99% that will think about bills. Maybe you've been struggling with your bills. Maybe you're struggling to pay your mortgage, or you're never going to get a house. Maybe your rent has gone too high. Maybe you want to have a small business. And Zach Polanski's doing that. Right. Of course, within the 99%, there's going to be people with different experiences. If you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're disabled, if you're trans, right, you are going to have different experiences. That's absolutely true. But what the left can say is we are far more united with us, the 99%, against the billionaire class. And this is what we need to unite on. It's a class first political project. Now, I say class first, not class only, because make no mistake, I'm not a class reductionist. I don't think we should forget about social issues. In fact, you can't. I actually think it's a bad analysis, because there are so many factors in which class and social issues are intertwined. You can't simply break it apart. But it should be a class first thing where you say, this is what we are unified on. And Zach's doing that, and he's doing it very well. And I think he needs to continue down that road.
Yeah, I always say AOC, Bernie Sanders, Zoran Mamdani, these are all people, Jeremy Corbyn, who believe that trans women are women, for example, but they don't get questioned on it because they're always talking like cost of living first. Like that's generally what they, or in AOC's case, it will be like house politics first. They don't like get caught up in it, but they are nonetheless allies of the trans community, allies of immigrants, allies. Do you know what I mean? They don't get caught up in the cultural talking points. It's as you say, the difference between class first and class only. And I think you've got to be really careful with that. I also think vibe is a massive thing if you're going to appeal to young men. And I noticed that I was watching some footage of Zoran Mamdani. Zoran Mamdani goes after Andrew Cuomo, and part of the vibe that you need to have is the "we are fighting for you" vibe, and we're fighting against a clear enemy. And I think that is something that I think liberals struggle with. They struggle to see an actual enemy, define that enemy, and then go after that enemy. And I think that's a trap which the left needs to be careful of falling into, and it instead needs to go, instead of getting caught in the trap of not defining their enemy, define themselves against the millionaires, the billionaires. I think that's where it's probably going. I do have to move on to our second story, but I have to warn you that this one will be a heavy one. So just a content warning for graphic and traumatic content. So, imagine it. You're Fatima Bakit. You're pregnant, 25 years old, and peering through the fence as you lay prone next to the rest of your family, trying to lie still so that the circling drones don't see you. You can see the last surviving medical clinic and watch as 2 Toyota trucks smash down the gates, trapping you and your family inside. The medics there have built foxholes to escape artillery shelling, and they dive inside. There's about 9 of them that dive inside. The militia gets out of the Toyota trucks. Of course, they're armed with guns, and none of the people inside the complex are. And tells the people who jumped into the foxholes, "Come out, slaves." A doctor comes out, and seeking to plead mercy for the people inside, he is instantly shot in the stomach. The medics in the foxholes are pulled out. Men, women, it doesn't matter. Gunshot, gunshot, gunshot. Dead, dead, dead. You watch as at least 15 men and children are led outside and shot, one after the other. Your husband is shot dead instantly, and then your 5-year-old son is shot in the back, parts of his body spattering across you, the back of your hand, and your his 3-year-old brother as well. Your blind uncle, who was lying next to you, is the only man who survives for a moment, but then they shoot him as he stands up too. The systematic killing spree lasts another 70 hours. Now, what I just read to you is a real account from a Sudanese woman, repurposed in my own words, but all of those were real events that took place and happened to one real woman. reported in The Guardian after the massacre of the people at the Zamzam refugee camp in southwest Sudan. This happened in April this year. The Zamzam refugee camp had 500,000 refugees in it, thousands of whom were systematically slaughtered by the RSF. They attacked it as if it was a military target. But it's worse than just a slaughter, it's a targeted genocide aimed primarily at local indigenous populations. In particular, non-Arab and Masalit indigenous populations are targeted for extermination by the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, because they are the most resistant to the RSF's aims and the interests of the UAE, who the RSF are bankrolled by. Imported slaves to work the gold mines are Imported slaves to work the gold mines are easier to control than people with local ties, than indigenous populations. They're more likely to know the local area, they're more likely to be able to form resistance and to push back against the aims of the RSF and the UAE. Why do I mention this now? Well, because in the last few days, the RSF have taken El-Fasher, and committed another massacre that humanitarian groups believe is part of this ongoing genocide. They are known for brutal sexual violence and mass killings, seeking control of gold-rich areas of Darfur, much of which is then passed to the UAE. You could think of it as like gold laundering. The UAE supports these paramilitary groups, and then these paramilitary groups give or sell gold to the UAE, who buy it for a marked down price, and then that gold makes its way onto Middle Eastern and Western markets. It's gold laundering by any other name. Satellite images obtained by Al Jazeera show the extent of the slaughter in El-Fasher.
Well, new images have emerged that show the potential scale of the violence in El-Fasher. Yale University's Humanitarian Research Lab has analysed these satellite images of the city taken on Monday after the RSF moved in. In multiple locations, they say, there are large clusters of objects which are consistent with the size of human bodies and technical vehicles. There are also large areas of red discoloration on the ground nearby. These patches of red, what could be pools of blood, were not seen in images taken before the RSF's advance. And more clusters of objects consistent with the size of human bodies have been captured outside of El-Fasher. There have been reports that civilians were shot while trying to flee the city.
We owe a lot of the satellite coverage that we have of Sudan, by the way, to projects conducted by the Clooney family, as in George Clooney and the Clooney family, because basically those satellites were put in place in order to help prevent atrocities like this by showing the world militaries getting ready for attacks. But sadly, we live in a time now where the international order is very much taking a we don't care approach to so many things going on right now, whether that's Israel-Palestine, whether that's the Congo, or whether that's Sudan, South Sudan. And Britain is more than capable of preventing the UAE from co-signing this violence, which can, and our intervention can actually stop it altogether. At the time of the Zamzam massacre, The Guardian wrote, Lamy could have used his leverage to tell his Emirati counterpart to cancel the outrageous attack on a displacement camp. If you don't, you are not invited to London, says a UN expert. Such a warning could have had merit. Sources reveal Emirati officials are in constant contact with the RSF's leader, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemedti. Oh God, I'm going to struggle with that one. Hemedti, among others. Sources, in fact, reveal the UAE had already moved to prevent another massacre. Sources say in June 2024, Abu Dhabi called Hemedti and told him to stop a planned assault on El-Fasher after the UN Security Council introduced a resolution demanding the RSF cease fighting around Zamzam and El-Fasher, the neighbouring city. No attack happened. So we have the capability of stopping them, and it's worked in the past in this exact region with this exact scenario, but we chose not to. We currently choose not to. It's not seen as a priority. The taking of El-Fasher means the RSF almost control the entire region, and the government forces, who, by the way, commit plenty of atrocities too, I don't want to whitewash the government. It can seem like I'm taking a side in the conflict. I'm not on the side of the RSF or on the side of the government particularly. What my read on the situation is, I just want mass atrocity to stop. I want um, attacks on civilians to stop, and in particular, I would like ethnic cleansing to stop. That would be good. But I got distracted. Excuse me. So the government forces do commit plenty of atrocities, but those government forces are also not in a good place to currently stop the RSF. And that kind of asymmetric warfare, where you've got one very strong side and one very weak side, and already you've got ethnic cleansing happening, it's often a precursor to increasingly horrible atrocities. Curtis, is there anything that you want to add on this story?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that aid hasn't entered the region for 18 months. 18, it might be 19 months now. So, of course, the basic necessities not getting in. Now, there's also evidence that a key US and UK ally is trying to intervene to stop aid from getting in. There's many forces in this, right? Now, David Lammy came out and said, we're going to give £120 million to Sudan. Okay. But what's so frustrating about this, and actually it's bullshit, is that it's been found that UK arms has been found in the hands of the RSF, right? Because of the global arms trade in which we participate in, you can find arms all around the world in places that we apparently think is atrocity. You know, David Lammy said it's disgraceful that not enough people are speaking about the Sudan or Sudanese genocide. Well, here you are with your government supplying weapons to them indirectly, but also directly too, because the UAE are very much complicit in this, and there's also evidence that we supply arms to UAE. There's many evidence, or a lot of evidence, that suggests as well that the UAE is funding and arming the RSF. Now, of course, they say they're not doing that. Of course, they're not going to do that. But a case was brought to the ICJ that said the UAE is complicit in the Sudanese genocide, and we are connected. Right. So this £120 million is kind of like, giving money one hand and taking money elsewhere. Because, of course, Sudan was another area which we occupied in the mid-19th century. We didn't leave until around the 1950s. Now, of course, colonialism and imperialism has been a big factor of global conflicts. And just because we left, it doesn't mean that troubles haven't ended. But we are still directly involved in the colonialism of Sudan because we are supporting many companies that is extracting and exploiting Africa. So when you hear David Lammy say, we're going to give loads of money and aid to Sudan, he's taken it in with another hand through exploitation, through colonialism, right? So what we basically have is it feels like imperialism by stealth, while saying, oh, look, we're doing so much about this, when evidently we're not. And you've just read out there that we can do something about this to help stop the ethnic cleansing and the genocide. Now, Boris Johnson in 2022 went to the UAE, right? And now Keir Starmer's Prime Minister also met with the UAE. And his defense, Starmer said, is economic growth is the number one mission. I'm sorry, but I don't think we should be having state visits or visiting other states that are engaging in a genocide. I know does that make me sound like radically left wing? I don't think we should. In fact, we shouldn't be prioritizing trade with them and economic policy with them. We should be using economics to throttle them. We should stop all arms sales to Israel. We should stop any aid to Israel because of what they're doing in terms of Gaza. And we should be doing the same for Sudan and everywhere in the world. But at the end of the day, despite politicians saying these are awful atrocities, colonialism and imperialism still rules the day. We're still financially benefiting from it, and the global arms trade is still very strong. I mean, I recommend people watch Andrew Feinstein's Shadow World, a documentary into the global arms trade. So really, it's not much of a different policy than it is to Gaza, but the difference is we're pretending that we're against it when we're clearly not.
Yeah, the arms trade is a sort of angle on this that of course is fairly common across the Middle East as well. Like we're arming and selling weapons to all sorts of regimes that commit horrible atrocities, and the main determinant of whether or not our government will vocally support or even mention the atrocities that those states commit, and whether or not we sell arms to them in the first place, of course, seems to be some superficial idea of whether or not they're our ally, because I think it's correct. Iran does commit atrocities. Absolutely, Iran commits atrocities. But it's also true that Saudi Arabia commits horrible atrocities, and we should have broken diplomatic ties with Saudi Arabia a long time ago for the crimes committed in Yemen, among other things, but also crimes committed against Saudi citizens, against Jamal Khashoggi, of course, just the most horrific crimes. And yeah, I think the way that we do our foreign policy as a whole needs a lot of work. And I think maybe the Sudan crisis is fairly unique in the level of apart from maybe the Congo as well, in terms of the amount of sexual violence that takes place there as well. I think that's something we've got to consider. Um, I'm just sort of thinking: is there a way, a mechanism that we have to interrupt the gold trade? I guess one of the things is to bring in an embargo on UAE gold until they start complying with international law with regards to the militias they're funding in Darfur. But of course, that would, just thinking out loud here, that would probably interrupt the militias that we fund in the Middle East, and this is part of the problem, isn't it? Unless you deconstruct Western foreign policy, there's still going to be problems. Yeah, I don't have an answer on that one. Did you want to jump in on solutions?
I mean, it's true. We just need to impose sanctions on countries, which we don't do, because obviously, being on the outside, there's not too much we can do. One, we can obviously identify our role historically and how neo-colonialism is still very much alive, but we need strict sanctions. Now, of course, there is an argument that would say that sanctions then hit poorer people and those in the region. But at the end of the day, we should not be rewarding these states. We shouldn't be throwing out the carpet for them. We shouldn't be saying stuff like what Keir Starmer is saying, which is, economic growth is my number one mission. No, humanitarian rights should be your number one priority. But this is a global issue too, because the Sudan genocide is not seen as a priority by many the world over.
I wish I'd researched this before, but if anybody knows of any petitions or any groups, human rights groups, that are particularly good on advocacy to the UK government to try and get them to intervene and pressure the UAE to stop approving the actions of the RSF, if you can drop them in the chat or any information please do, and we'll try and mark out those comments and see if we can read them out at the end. So let's go on. But before we continue, we would like to remind our viewers that we are 5 volunteers keeping the ship going. We do this around our paid jobs. Our goal is to become full-time, meaning we can increase our content, be far more ambitious, and build a sustainable left-wing alternative. Look at what we've managed to build already on the funding that you guys have given us. If we can turn this into a fully fledged media operation, it will be truly amazing with proper training, proper media training, all of that stuff. We could really have something great here, and we're very, very hopeful for the future. Your help has made so much of a difference already, from equipment to covering rallies and interviews, and obviously your support means everything. We rely on the small donations, though, so if you want to be a part of an organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for 99p. I should have mentioned that. So flash the graphic back up. Anyway, so let's go on to our third and final story. A 4-day working week is where we need to be heading as a society. It's just a fact, and there's many reasons for this. First of all, your work-life balance. Just having a better work-life balance is good for everybody. We're not meant to be in workplaces for most of our lives. Most of us want to, what's the phrase? You want to work to work to live rather than live to work. That's the phrase, right? We want a good work-life balance, but there's other reasons why we should be moving to a 4-day working week. For example, addressing women's unpaid labor and rethinking the model of fatherhood that we use, so that fatherhood is a role where you take a greater role in your child's life, and in the domestic labour of the household. So that you're doing more of the care. And by the way, this has shown to increase children's outcomes. Women who have who grow up with fathers that are more present in the household and that engage with them more, and share the housework as they should, obviously. Those women have better outcomes. They're more likely to be promoted into higher positions. But obviously, there's other reasons for a 4-day working week. The cost of living, employers should be paying more, and this is moving us towards a model where employers expect to pay more for less hours, if you see what I mean. There's also the increased productivity that comes with a 4-day working week. There's the AI and automation side of it as well. We're going to be in a situation soon where many of our jobs are going to be replaced with AI. Talking heads like me can quite easily be replaced with AI. It's happening already. I need to make this argument now before you'll replace me with an AI talking head. No, but in all seriousness, the reason that we need to move to that 4-day working week is because we can be more productive with less time, and we need a model that allows that to increase our work-life balance rather than put us in a situation where we are like being made redundant. I mean, and I don't mean just being made redundant from one job. I mean being made redundant as workers altogether. Actually, our economy and our automation should serve us as people first. I think that has to be the priority, and a step towards a 4-day working week is one way towards that. But a study published in Nature and Human Behavior demonstrated this conclusively earlier this year. Popular Science magazine summarized the method and findings of this study. And now bear with me. The 4-day week global, which is an organization, recently tasked an international team of sociologists with enlisting more than 140 companies across the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and Ireland to participate in a series of 6-month pilot program trials. During that time, their employees would switch to a 4-day working week with no adjustments in pay or benefits, so they're still getting paid the same. The 4DWG offered each company assistance in setting up the new system, and earlier this year, nearly 3,000 employees began clocking in 32 instead of 40 hours a week. The initial data from the team's first 2 trials, involving nearly 33 companies, was clear. None of the companies said they were necessarily opposed to maintaining the 4-day working week, and reported increases to workplace productivity as well as revenue growth. Meanwhile, employees cited less stress and feelings of burnout, as well as a general improvement to their physical and mental well-being. According to the study's organizers, these results didn't come as a shock. Of course it didn't shock them. Studies consistently show that the 4-day working week is better for everyone involved. It's better for employees and employers. This has a lot to do with what employees do with that extra day off. So often people use the 3rd day for personal errands and medical appointments that they usually attempted to fit into their busier 40-hour weeks. There was also more time for hobbies, leisure, housework, and personal care, all areas that help improve general mood and health. Meanwhile, companies frequently saved money through lower healthcare costs and lower employee turnover rates. The 4-day working week is just a logical option in the age of automation, when so many of us need a reset of our work-life balance. And I feel like, I mean, that is ultimately what a lot of the young men in one of the videos we were watching earlier were saying about their discontent. They need a reset in the way that life is working for them, because this work-life balance and this level of unaffordability, it doesn't work for anyone. Nobody likes it. And affordable lives means building in leisure time. And what we need is a proper answer to the cost of living crisis. Imagine my surprise then when this week Labour attacked the 4-day working week in South Cambridgeshire Council. According to LBC, local government secretary Steve Reed wrote a scathing letter to the Lib Dem-run council about their productivity, demanding that they stop the 4-day working week. The independent report shows that performance declined in key housing-related services, including rent collection, reletting times, and tenant satisfaction with repairs, especially where vulnerable residents may be affected. If social housing is being built by this government and your team are unable to move residents into them so that they are standing empty, then I must reiterate my deep disappointment with your conduct. A source in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government told The Telegraph, "We are not going to micromanage councils. We want to push power out of Whitehall. However, when we see unacceptable behaviour, we'll call it out. Wasting taxpayer money in this fashion is completely unacceptable. Voters deserve the respect of a 5-day week." You know, I feel really respected by some poor worker's life being made miserable for no real reason. It doesn't increase productivity. It doesn't help the employer. It just makes them more miserable. But I feel respected when that happens. When some poor public sector worker has to endure a longer working week, that really warms my little Tory graph soul. I feel so respected when this is the norm that I have to put up with. Like, who thinks like that? Who would honestly say that? Obviously, I'm being facetious. Like, who would honestly say that? Because I feel respected when I'm given enough leisure time, and my society is one in which we all have a better, more affordable work-life balance. So, what's going on here? Well, as you've probably guessed, Steve Reed's assessment isn't entirely honest. The Lib Dem Council leader, Bridget Smith, told The Telegraph, "We are extremely disappointed to receive this letter from the Minister, as we are an exceptionally high-performing council. Since implementing the 4-day week, a working arrangement in which colleagues do 100% of their work in 32 hours each week, we have delivered an annual saving of almost £400,000, maintained an improved performance, our turnover has decreased by 41%, and the number of applications for roles advertised has surged by 123%. Where we previously struggled to recruit and retain expert colleagues, such as planners, we now have a full planning service which has just published our most ambitious local plan proposals ever, delivering on the government's agenda to increase housing and jobs in our area. These results speak for themselves. The independently assessed data for the trial shows that all key performance indicators had either improved or remained the same, bar 3 related to housing. Independent analysis shows these 3 isolated indicators were due to factors completely independent of the 4-day working week, and we are in fact in the top quartile nationally, and performance is improving further. So it turns out that the Labour government was playing politics. There was nothing wrong with the 4-day working week. Productivity, recruitment, performance, it's all improved. The problem is no one knows that. According to Ground News, only 5 outlets covered this story. The Telegraph, The Times, LBC, GB News, and the Daily Skeptic. They're all right-wing outlets who are happy to lie to you about the benefits of a 4-day working week. What do you think their coverage was like, realistically? They'll act like it's a two-sided debate and we can't really come to a conclusion, and there's arguments on both sides. It's pretty conclusive. Like, it's not a two-sided debate. Every single time a study is done on this, productivity is higher. People's lives improve. Well-being of employees improves. Staff retention improves. Everybody's lives improves. It's completely unhinged the way this is covered. Curtis, are you concerned by how all of this was covered? And of course, do you support a 4-day working week?
Well, Steve Reed is a key ally of Morgan McSweeney. I just want to put that out there. So no surprise that he's just a dick. It's absolutely wild to me. So, I mean, I don't need to repeat the evidence there that a 4-day week is a step in the right direction because it's good for productivity, it's good for business, and it's good for the health of the workers, right? We should be striving towards a world with more leisure. I know, crazy, right? And then to have a Labour MP, right? A Labour MP calling for Labour conditions to be worsened. So for a long time, Keir Starmer's Labour Party was things can't get better. And now we're in a situation where they're saying, actually, things can get worse, contrary to the evidence. Contrary to the evidence that shows that it works, it saves money, and everyone's happy. The party of Labour that's supposed to improve your material conditions, your labour regulations, is now arguing against it. This is the modern day Labour Party. It is bootlicking sickness. These people need to leave. These people need to go, right? Now, in the 1930s, John Maynard Keynes predicted by 2030 that we would have a 15-hour work week. We're 5 years away from supposedly having a 15-hour work week. Are we anywhere close? Of course we're not. And why is that? Well, first of all, because of the bootlicking nature this country loves to engage in, the idea of having less working hours is seen as lazy. Wild stuff. What to me, that shows a sign of weakness and subservient to power and the bosses. Remember, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, actually earlier than that, late 19th century, we had people who said, you know what, we're no longer going to take this boot on our neck and we're going to form unions and we're going to stand up to the bosses who are exploiting us, right? Now that culture has changed. But why did John Maynard Keynes get it so wrong? And he's not the only one. Many people said at the time that we would have a shorter working week. Is because the politics that underpins it hasn't changed. Now, John Maynard Keynes believed that technological process would create the conditions in which we could have more leisure time. And people today still make that mistake. But the problem isn't technology. Again, it's the politics that underpins it all. What does that mean? Well, we've got technology that can do many things. We have the technology that can improve our working conditions, can give us more leisure time, and we literally have robots who can automate things in factories, for example. So why do we still have the 40-hour working week? Why, in some instances, people are working longer hours for lower wages? Simply because those that control the economy are the elites, are the wealthy. And I'm going to drop the S word here, Ben, right? What we need is socialism. We need socialism because we need democratic control of the economy. We need democratic control over technology and equipment so we can collectively make the decisions that are the betterment of us. When you have the top 1% and the very few owning the factories and the machinery, they're going to make decisions that enrich themselves. And what they've done with technology and automation is to exploit that by basically saying, we don't need to employ human beings. We don't need to pay them an hourly wage, or we don't need to pay them, sick pay, holiday pay. It's a one-off payment, and then we, take the surplus value from that. But what that has left us, human beings, is out of jobs. We are unemployed, underemployed, or the only jobs we have left are very, very low paid. We don't have much competition. Like, the bargaining power from Labour is at an all-time low, mostly from unions, of course. But because of automation. Technology has enslaved us. And the only way we can have technology to free us is to change the politics. And we need the democratic control of these appliances, of this technology, because workers are not going to vote to make themselves poorer. We're going to vote to make ourselves richer and have our material conditions met. So we need to move beyond this capitalist system, which is to say, look, the fruits of the labor that not just human labor is bringing, but automation and technological labor that's bringing, right? That needs to be shared, because if it isn't, what you're going to do is create a society where the richer get richer and the poorer aren't just getting poorer. We can't find the work. And this is the party of labor that is basically arguing against what the entire party's existence called for the last 100 years. They want worsening material conditions, especially in the face of evidence that shows that it works. Many businesses have adopted the 4-day week because in some instances, profits actually go up, or productivity actually goes up, because there's a fatigue wall we have. Now, I think that it's not, we shouldn't just have a 4-day week. I really support a 6-hour working day as well. And I think actually, a shorter working day is more important than a shorter working week, although I support both. I think the Green Party should run on a manifesto that says 4-day week, 6-hour working day, because there's so much lost productivity when you have a longer working day. Like, say you're at the office, for example, a lot of wasted time is speaking to people and having pointless meetings, whereas people could just bash out the work, especially when you take your lunch, right? You take your lunch and you come back and you're fatigued, you're a little bit tired. There's that sort of after lunch productivity dip, and a lot of studies show that the productivity doesn't return to what it was before you take lunch. So a lot of people are actually stretching out their work to meet the 8-hour work day, whereas we could shorten it and people could do a shorter stint, high productivity, work hard, and then go home earlier. So we really need to be looking at a shorter working day as well. But of course, the right-wing media is going to argue against it, because it's not just the fact that they love profits for big business, but they want the idea of workers not having control, right? Because again, like, the evidence shows that big business or any business won't lose out on a shorter working week. So why would right-wing media be against it? Because it's deeper than that. They don't want the idea that workers can have power and control, because when we give workers more power and control, workers might demand more, which is very scary for the billionaire class, but very good for us.
Hungry workers are obedient workers, Curtis. They will do as they're told, or they will be homeless. I think that's a part of what it comes down to. You reminded me of a conversation that I heard between James Meadway, who's somebody I really, really admire, and Michael Walker, again, somebody I really, really like. And they were having a conversation about AI. I think it must have been about a year ago on one of their live shows. And Michael said, are you concerned about the rapid rate at which AI seems to be like developing? And James Midway said, well, not really, because the problems that we face would still be the same as the problems we faced 40 years ago. They just come at us at a slightly different rate. And it is so true. If you think about it, if you think about it in terms of AI or automation within the workplace, I'm more or less repeating what you're saying, but I wanted to put an example to it. If you're a Sainsbury's worker or a Tesco's worker, and they have the opportunity to bring in self-service machines, your job is at risk, because Tesco and Sainsbury's are not cooperatively run. There's a boss there, a CEO and an executive board, who decide that if it's not profitable to keep you on, they'll just get rid of you. And they could take the money that they're paying you, replace you with a self-service machine. It's much cheaper to run, and simply just replace you, and then all of the money that self-service machine then generates goes straight into their coffers, straight into the profits of the company. Whereas if you own your workplace, if your workers collectively own the workplace, if you own Sainsbury's collectively, then I think there's entirely changes the incentive structure, because now you're incentivized to be more productive by using this technology, but you're not going to fire yourself, as you said. And that's my case for why we should nationalize Sainsbury's. Me, you, Reem Ibrahim,
Ibrahim's going to be
Zach
knocking at your
Polanski.
door.
We're going to nationalize Sainsbury's. I think that's the campaign Zach should run on nationalize Sainsbury's. With that, let's go to our producer now for some comments. Hello, producer. Are you there?
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. It's sorry. I don't want to be weird, so don't bring that out of me. So really great show. Honestly, yeah, really, really good. Let's go to some comments then. We'll go to the super chats first. Sorry. Keep me posted, became a member. Thank you so much. Specs also gifted 5 turn left memberships. Thank you, Specs. We see you every week. You're wonderful. And blah de blah. Always a legend.
Yes, bloody blah.
Bloody blah. 20 turn left memberships. So thank you so much. So lots of people got some memberships tonight. Thank you. And now to the comments. I was laughing at Carl saying, "Who's this weirdo?" That was to you, Curtis.
I don't know.
Dominique.
People being disappointed that I'm wearing a hoodie, not a blazer.
Yes,
First of all, I was dragged off the street, right? And secondly, I'm in the guesting spot, you know. I can't upshow Ben, who's come out and worn a black t-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Like I should have worn a shirt.
You're trying to look like Michael Walker, aren't you?
Yeah. Is Michael Walker's thing wearing a black t-shirt? Is that? I guess it is.
Actually, more maybe Aaron. Actually.
Yeah.
Michael Walker's thing is having a pen in his hand. So Michael said hoodie, blazers curse. Did you not get the memo? And then also another comment on the blazers. Strange blazer this rando off the street is wearing. Yeah, facts.
Well, I'll promise to bring it next time.
You're gonna have to bring the blazers back, otherwise people are gonna start unsubscribing, Curtis.
True.
So I think let's talk about the 4-day working week. So my pal Foot gifted £10. Thank you so much. Very wonderful. Said not all employers are out of touch, but mine certainly are. When I mentioned and spoke about a 4-day working week, it was called ridiculous. It's infuriating. And it's true, it's because we still live in a time where people measure people's worth to how productive they are in society. And like, I don't know how we're going to get out of the shackles
It's
of
such
capitalism.
bootlickery, isn't it? But back in my day, I used to work 60-hour days.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, good for you. Like,
you.
I don't give a fuck. So, yeah.
But like,
But-
there is inherent value into exploiting yourself to someone else, and I think that's where we need to, us leftists, need to say, by the way, it's not cool, strong, or whatever to show how exploited you are. You need to be like the union person back in the day who was like, no, I'm not being exploited. I'm not being humiliated and embarrassed. So I think you kind of got to make people feel like, so you're happy to have the boot firmly on your neck. You're happy to be the bootlicker, are you?
Well,
Yeah,
you could think
exactly.
of it this way. Your average serf, your average medieval peasant or medieval serf who lived on feudal land, got up at 6 in the morning, and started tilling the fields or working the metal or whatever it was their job to do. Um, and people nowadays, like you can do what the average medieval serf got done in a day. You can do that in what, like 10 minutes with a couple of presses of a button. You know, like that's my toilet break. Do you know what I mean? And like I produced more in that time. It's the idea that you are more productive by working longer is just inconsistent with the rate at which technology progresses and our productivity goes up. Remember, our productivity has been going up and up and up and up, and wages have just stayed stagnant. Right?
And people's material conditions should be tied to productivity, but it's not, because the capitalists in that situation would go, oh, great, technology means that this person can produce this amount of commodity or whatever it is in a short amount of time, which before would take, days to do. That means that worker now can now go on to something else. That shouldn't be the case. Of course, once again, I'm going to throw the S word out. If we had socialism, right, where we decided, like, democratically what we should do, we would say, oh, look, we can produce more work in a short amount of time. So let's decide what we do with that. Do you want to work on something else, or do you have extra leisure time? And whatever the answer you come up with, that's democracy decided within your own firm or your own business, not decided for you. But as I said, because technology evolves, the politics hasn't. The more productive we come through technology, we're just told, okay, well, you've got the rest of the day to do something else. And you actually find you're doing a lot of bullshit tasks. How many examples have you been in a job where you felt like you've completed your task and you have to find things to do just to justify your existence for that 8-hour day?
Exactly.
Does that make any sense to you? Does
So
that seem like a
fucked.
sensible economic system? No, it doesn't, but we have to do it anyway.
It's actually so true. So true. Like, whenever I finish a task, I go to my line manager. I'm like, is there anything else you want me to do? Like, I'll do it for you. Like, come on, Sarah. Fucking grow up.
Work smarter, not harder.
harder.
That's the
That's my
socialist
thing.
resistance to the capitalist boss.
know.
Work smarter, not harder.
I'm just a victim of the system. What can I say? Knopfler said, Keynes was heavily inspired by the command state capitalist economy of the Soviets. Perhaps the future of Western capitalists must be a large state market player. What do you guys think about that?
I think, yeah, that could well be true. I do also think, of course, that Keynes had a lot of blind spots, as Curtis sort of like highlighted. But I think the fundamental truth of Keynesian economics comes from making sure that wealth reaches the bottom 50% of society, because they're the people that do the spending in the economy. And Keynesian economic cycles are kind of just based off of that. Yeah.
On that comment, you're probably going to see more of that anyway, ironically, because I think, and again, I think it's James Mead where he makes this point. He says neoliberalism is ending. The problem is what's replacing it. And I think you're going to see larger state investment coupled with fascist politics. So, I mean, a lot of European nations do this, right? And even if you look at like reform, okay, they are still Thatcherite neoliberals, right? Let's not forget that. But they're saying stuff like nationalizing water. They would scrap the 2-child limit. So in a way, we're probably moving to that anyway. Now, in terms of like the future of Western capitalism must have a large state market player. We kind of already do have a massive state sector within the market. They just hate to admit it. I mean, whether it is the US bailing out Mclaine in Argentina to the tune of 30 billion, whether it's actually Donald Trump kind of like nationalizing, like not partly nationalizing the industry, but to make profits from it. And also the fact that the state is actually really good in the market economy. And this is not me saying we should nationalize everything. That's not what I support. But there are so many instances where you can say, let's leave it up to the market and like private companies can do it. Oftentimes the state can do a better job, like healthcare, for example, right? The healthcare does a better job for providing healthcare. And we actually have to, in order to protect private interest in the market, we have to stifle the state. So the only way you can have like a health insurance based system like America is to stop the state from providing a better service. Now, if you're a free market or free marketeer, right, then you should say, actually, let's let private companies do these things and let's let the state do it too. And we'll let the market decide. But in almost all cases, especially when it comes to human necessity, the state will win. Because there's one thing that the state can do, which private companies can't do, is it doesn't need the profit motive. Of course, that works for natural monopolies. It might not work when you've got like the state owning a sofa company, and you don't particularly want that, do you? You want that to be in the hands of the private market, right? But when it comes to railways, for example, the state will always be the better competition. So you might as well just not have the market involved in it anyway.
Yeah, I do also think the way that the state can invest in long-term funding for things like R&D is fairly unique. Like R&D projects can take place over potentially decades without the state. You know, like companies like Amazon can afford to do like big long-term R&D projects. But with the state, you can afford to do like 50-year projects, which it's just not feasible for a company to sort of look on that timeline because, as you say, profit motive. But yeah,
absolutely. On to the Sudan story. Sorry, I'll go to this one first. Becca said, wasn't Sarah allowed to talk about Sudan within the last couple of months in the show? Or am I mistaken? We have covered Sudan on Turn Left. Like, we've covered it on Normal Island a couple times. And it's important because we've said collectively that it's something that isn't covered enough, despite the fact that it is incredibly, like, the scenes there are horrifying. They've been horrifying for God knows how long now, like 2.5 years. And then Noffel said, it's accurate to say that it's an imperialist proxy war via the UAE, and I'm not inclined to like disagree with that. Like the UAE imports Sudan's gold, and it finances these militias, and it builds these ports and farms of land, and also starts telling people that they kind of, you know, they kind of just sit silently and pretend that they stand for peace and aid and whatever. But that, I think that's literally the benchmark for like modern imperialism. And I think the way that it's being framed currently is that, and I've heard this through what people have been saying in real life. I hate that I have to say in real life, but there is some sort of like internal conflict, or that is somewhat or that it's African unrest. But this war is being sustained by external factors, and when we frame it like that, I think what we're doing is we are denying the accountability that should be taken by America or by the UAE or by Britain, because the UAE isn't just, you know, it's not just supplying cash. Like, they are, and other people are defining who wins and who loses and how long this suffering is going to last. And I think if we're not going to name the truth, then and we keep treating the war in Sudan as if it was some broken state problem instead of a front in a global scramble for like resources, then I think we're doing it an injustice. We're doing it an injustice.
Yeah, and the thing is that many conflicts around the world, whether it was deliberately done as a proxy war or not, you can find that the West will find a way to exploit it anyway, to exploit the resources. So for us, you know, imperialist, greedy Westerners, we might be like, oh, we might not have started this conflict, but we're certainly going to get involved to get the plunder the resources. In this instance, though, we absolutely helped start it because it's obviously the aftermath, or I say the aftermath of colonialism. It's still neo-colonialism.
Yeah, and sorry, Ben.
And I was just going to say, Africa is the most resource-rich continent on the planet. Like nowhere else even comes close in terms of its access to diamonds, gold, all of the things that we associate with real riches. and yet because of colonial exploitation and that colonial exploitation is still ongoing, and there's still that incentive to keep it ongoing.
Yep.
Instead, it is Western countries and countries in the Middle East that are benefiting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry, go on.
I know, you're so right, and I think I think we need to be calling out people that call it a civil war as well, because then that's just a euphemism of empire. And yeah, I think every time I'm hearing, do you know, it's kind of like when journalists call Palestinian hostages prisoners. Like, it makes viewers feel sad but
That passive
detached.
language, isn't it?
Exactly. Like, you'll feel sad for the fact that there are Palestinians who are actually hostages, but they're being framed as prisoners, but you'll feel detached from the story. And I think that's the same thing with Sudan, because it's completely erasing, the fingerprints of those the countries that exist in the quote unquote West, and it turns a political crisis into some cultural like pathology that, oh look, like Africa's unstable again, and it's just like as if that instability weren't manufactured for profit by the very same people that are framing it as some sort of civil war. So
would the term proxy war be a better one? What's the right term for it?
do you
know what I mean?
I would call what's happening there like just a massacre, a genocide, like the same way that we frame Palestine as a genocide and as a complete injustice and a violation of like all the laws that are out there. That is the same way that we should be framing Sudan. And I have been calling it, an imperialist project. That's what I think it is. But I think I would just call it. I would call it a genocide, because what's happening there is insane.
It's just the term, obviously, people obviously genocide invariably goes hand in hand with armed conflict. Like every time there's a genocide historically, there is also an armed conflict. There's very few examples where there isn't a sort of like ongoing like war or conflict of some kind. And I guess that's an argument for like dropping the term war, but it's that obviously that term is used as a cover, and I think although we should call it ethnic cleansing, should call it a genocide. I think it is also worth having a term for like
I agree.
Like I want to say Cold War, proxy war. What's the term for? I can't think of the right term for it, but
proxy war could be accurate though, but I think it's only if we understand who it's a proxy for and what interests are being fought for, and why that label can also obscure like the deeper imperial logic that's at play as well. So I think it fits definitely, because you've got external backers that are driving internal battles. But so that's a really good question that I have to think about. So going on to the first story. Jeremy Corbyn seems to have made terrible judgment regarding allies and colleagues. Someone had said, I think someone had mentioned Jeremy Corbyn. I can't remember who it was, if it was you, Cog, or Curtis.
I can't remember. I can't remember talking about him in the first.
So I've been picking Noffel quite a bit.
Oh, sorry. It was probably in relation to the young men in that first story, wasn't it? Because they mentioned Jeremy Corbyn. That's it. Sorry, that was hours ago now.
It was, and it ties in with Noffel's comment that the Corbyn to Farage pipeline is real. However, there's a likelihood these people believed in a form of strongman politics anyways, which transcends left and right, but is material consequence. Did you guys want to say anything on that?
You got to have a fighting spirit. You've got to go after them, and you've got to come across. I actually think that there's a real argument for now this is a super niche hobby of mine, but I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's the reason that my eye is currently like red. Thanks, Sarah.
Never heard you say that.
But honestly, I think that at its core, do you see what I have to deal with, right? Do you see what I have to deal with, guys? Like, I think at its core, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a left-wing sport in its philosophy. It's teaching the less powerful how to be more powerful through the proper application of leverage. Alavanca is the Brazilian term for leverage, and how to beat down opponents that are bigger than you and use the advantages you have. I also think it wouldn't hurt the left to be a bit more involved in the MMA kind of like cage fighting or Brazilian jiu-jitsu scene, and the Brazilian jiu-jitsu scene is constantly growing. It's also very much like a game of chess. If you've ever done jiu-jitsu, it is like a game of chess, and it's just like it is appealing to a lot of very
you want to
nerdy
see
left-wing men.
you kind of want to see where historically left-wing politics has been infused in football. You kind of want to see the same for combat sports, because MMA
Yeah.
and UFC, especially in America, is very right-wing.
Literally, yeah.
But in terms of like Knopfler's comment, right? The thing is, though, first of all, like I do think like strongman politics is effective, but Corbyn wasn't particularly that kind of guy. He wasn't aggressive. In fact, he was very famous for saying, "I don't do the personal." He was very gentle. I mean, one of the slogans was kinder, gentler politics, which I love the right when they keep trying to like beat the left down with. Anytime a leftist says something aggressive, they're like, "Oh, what about the kinder, gentler politics?" And I always say, yeah, kinder, gentler politics, which means don't kill people through austerity, not saying please and thank you on twitter.com. That was Dawn Foster's tweet, God bless her and rest her soul, but she was brilliant when she said that. But so it's strongman politics. Yes, unfortunately, it's very like being strong is very popular, but the Corbyn to Farage pipeline is more the populist angle, because where the guy was like, I liked Corbyn, I just don't like Keir Starmer. I can speak to so many reform people who've done the same thing. Is because, and this is actually the same for the left, the support for Corbyn wasn't support for Labour. The support for Corbyn was, oh, we know this guy's an outsider. We don't like us leftists. I fucking hated Labour. I don't think I've ever liked the Labour Party. I've always despised it. But I like Jeremy Corbyn, and I was willing to vote for Labour because of him. Whereas Keir Starmer is very much the Labour establishment, and they're like, oh, Starmer is Labour. We don't like that, but Corbyn was kind of the outside of that. So I think that that anti-establishment bent, despite the fact that he was leader of a very establishment party, people understood that. Farage, again, he's not anti-establishment, but he's not, even though Reform is the party he's head of, like he's always been a personal character, a personal brand. He's been popular no matter which leader of the party he's been, whether it's UKIP, whether it's been Brexit Party or Reform. In fact, we all argue that if Farage wasn't the leader of Reform, they wouldn't be polling where they're polling. He knew that he had to be leader. His is far more of a personality cult than Jeremy Corbyn, but like, Corbyn had a bit of a personality cult, which is absolutely fine. Zach Plansky has that. You kind of need that in politics. And also, I just want to flash this up. Vicky has kindly put the tweet. So Dawn Foster, comrade who passed away, was fucking hilarious. I mean, I think she said that I was in Labour students around West Streeting, and he's always been a lickspittle little cunt.
That is
she had him banged to rights.
Beautifully put.
Very beautifully put. I'm going to end the comments there. But really great show, guys.
I feels like we barely got started on the comments. I suppose we have run over by quite a bit. But okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Curtis Daly.
Thank you. Whoever I am, I'm an imposter. Turn left brings on anyone these days, don't they?
Daly is spelt with an I. I will not budge on this position. There's an I in Daly.
My name.
Okay. So, yeah, thank you for coming on, Curtis. You're hosting on Friday, I think.
What? Yeah, I'm joking. Yeah, I am.
Wait, what?
I'll have a.
I just arrived. Yeah. Superb. All right, so there should be a superb show on Friday. And with that, please don't forget to help us out if you can, whether that's monetarily or just by liking and sharing the video. We're sending love out to you all. You've been watching Turn Left Media's Normal Ireland show with episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Have a wonderful evening.